In this unit I'm going to explain view range settings. Now the view range settings are applicable to both floor plans and reflected ceiling plans, and basically they're a series of parameters or properties that control exactly how each floor plan or ceiling plan is constructed. This is with regards where the model is cut through to generate your plans, how far you can see down into the plans, and the control of any objects that are above that cut plane. Now to find your view range settings, you need to be in a floor plan view or a ceiling plan view. You won't find them in any other type of view. And with no objects selected, you scroll down your view properties, and there you can see view range, and there's an edit button. Click on that and your view range properties box comes up. Now your view range settings are split into two main groups. The top group being consisted of three parameters called the primary range, and then below that separately is listed the view depth. Now in this unit I'm going to take you through each of these settings and we'll talk about what it does, what it controls, and the effect of the visibility of each object when you adjust it. So just for now I'm going to put that away. I'm just going to switch to a 3D view to show you the model that we're going to use to demonstrate this concept. So a quite simple model, 3 walls, a door, a window, some casework furniture and some chairs, and the walls that go down with some foundations underneath. Now just before we start I'm going to flick to a section view to show you the 4 levels that I've set up in this project, and you can see that I've named them to match those different planes that we saw in the view range setting. So remember that primary range consisted of the top, the cut plane and the bottom, and then there was a separate group which just consisted of view depth. By naming my levels to match those, it'll make it easier to demonstrate exactly what those view range settings do and how it controls the visibility of our various elements when we look in a plan view or a ceiling plan. As we work our way through the different view range settings, we're going to keep coming back to this floor plan view, and this is the one that relates to the level named bottom, which coincides with the bottom of the primary view range settings. So let's bring up those view range settings again for this view. Remember, the view properties here at the top level are view specific, so these view range settings and any adjustments we make to them only affect this particular floor plan in question. So let's bring this up again. Now I'm going to take you through each of these, but I'm not going to do it in this order. I'm going to swap the order around because it will make a lot more sense if we start with the cut plane, then we'll go to the bottom, then we'll go back up to the top, and then we will look at view depth. And it'll become apparent why I've changed the order as we go through the unit. So probably the easiest to start with is the cut plane. So this, if I just move that over to one side, is simply the height at which Revit is cutting through the model in this particular view to generate your cut objects. So your view range settings all have to be associated with a level to give it a finite height, a Z value. So in this case the associated level is called bottom, which associates with the view over there, and there is an offset of 1500 mil. So the cut plane is 1500 mil higher than that level. So I'll just put that away for a second. Let's make sure we fully understand what's happening. So go to my section view. So our floor plan is generated here, and Revit is going to cut through at 1500 mil above that associated level. So it's going to cut up here. Now I've just created an extra level up there to help explain the concept. We don't need that level to be there, it would still work. So the cut plane is currently set to 1500 mil above that associated level. So let's go back to that view, and as you may expect, because that window falls within that cut plane, it is literally cut through. So we can see the window there in plan. and the door obviously falls in that zone as well, so that's cut through. So let's go back to our section. Let's take the window and let's lower the sill level down to 200 mil above the bottom level. So now the window doesn't quite reach the cut plane of our floor plan view. So let's go back, and we can see now that indeed the wall is cut through, but the window is now below the cut plane. If we wanted to lower the cut plane to cut back through the window, all we would do is go to view range, cut plane, let's drop that down to say 900 mil, hit apply, and you saw there instantly the cut plane is dropped and the window is now cut through again. So the cut plane is probably the easiest of the view range settings to understand. It's just a horizontal plane you can alter the height of in your floor plan or ceiling plan view to determine where the objects are actually cut through. Let's now move on to the bottom of the primary range. So in our floor plan, bring up the view range settings again, and in the primary range, the bottom there, we can set the bottom of the primary range. Now what this plane does is determine how far you can see down into the view in a normal projection style. Now what I mean by that is we've got a floor slab here, just highlight, just very quickly switch to 3D. So that's the floor element we're talking about. Let's go back to our floor plan. So we want to see the edge of the floor here. So go to our section view. There is the bottom of the primary range. Our floor, or top edge of our floor, lies within that range or on it, so it is seen in projection. If I lifted the bottom of the primary range in the view range settings, we wouldn't see that in normal projection. Now just go back to there. Now what I mean by normal projection is Revit elements can be drawn in different line styles, and Revit controls your line styles for whether an element is cut through or whether it's seen in projection, i.e. not cut through but just sort of seen slightly in the distance. So any elements in your model that aren't cut through but fall within that bottom range between the bottom and the cut plane will just be drawn in a normal projection line style, as in this floor element here. Okay, let's move on to the top of the primary range. So let's bring up our view range settings again. So remember that group up here, the primary range, we've got a parameter to set the top of the primary range. Now this is the one that normally confuses a lot of people. Even people who've been using Revit quite a long time can get confused by what exactly this parameter does. I'll explain why the confusion exists. If we go back to our section, so we've said that our floor plan is basically a camera looking down into the model, and the model being cut through at a certain height. So the cut plane is here, so the camera is somewhere above it looking down, the model is cut through and we see things below it. So the question arises, well, what does this do up here then, the top plane? Surely we can't see anything that's up above the cut plane because that's where we're cutting through the model. Well, it isn't strictly the case. Revit has the ability to display objects above the cut plane just for a limited number of categories. Now those categories are windows, casework and generic model elements. So any elements that you've got that fall into any of those three categories, that is windows, casework or generic models, will be displayed even though they're above the cut plane. Now we can demonstrate that by these two wall mounted cupboards here. You can see that they're clearly above the 1500 mm cut plane, but if I go back to the plan view in question, there you can see the wall cupboards. Now they're above the cut plane and they are being displayed, and you can see that Revit has applied a different line style to show that they're above. So it's done that automatically because it's worked out that they fall in that zone above the cut plane but below the top primary range. Now just while we're here, just note this piece of casework here, this tall cupboard, isn't being cut through. Let's just go back to the section. Now that cupboard actually falls within the cut plane, but there are a number of categories in Revit where the objects, even if they fall within the cut plane, are not actually cut through. They are drawn in projection, i.e. as if the camera was here above them looking down. So if I go back to that view there, the plan view, hence it's as if we're looking down on the top of the cupboard, even though, as we've just seen, the cut plane is cutting actually through the height of it. So that is what the top of the primary range is for. It's displaying a very limited number of elements of certain categories that lie within that range. Everything else, every other category, the objects are not displayed. And say that object there is being displayed in projection because it's one of a handful of categories that's called non-cuttable. Revit won't cut through it even though the cut plane intersects it. Okay, we've covered the three parameters in the primary range, the top, the cut plane and the bottom. Let's move on to view depth. So just put that box away for now. Let's go back to our section. So again, we've set up these levels and I've named them to match those parameters so we can better explain what's happening with this view range settings. So again, it's slightly confusing to some people what this view depth's for, because we've said a plan is generated by a camera looking down, we've cut through, we've set the bottom of the view, how far we can see down into the view. So what's this further parameter lower down in the model? Well, that is so you can control the visibility of elements that you want displayed but in a different line style. So in this example here, in a floor plan, this bottom floor plan set at this level, you may want to actually see the edge of the footings displayed in a different line style. So that's where this view depth comes into play. So you're saying to Revit, I'm interested primarily in all the objects between the cut plane and the bottom, but there are certain objects that are beyond that view or that view range that I actually want displayed in a different line style. So if we switch to our bottom view there, we can actually see the edge of the footings and notice how Revit is applying a line style. Now it'll always apply the beyond line style to objects that fall in that zone. You can control the configuration of that line style called beyond. It's a line style that's set in the system. If you want to control that, just go to Manage, Additional Settings, Line Styles, expand the lines there, and there you have a line style called Beyond, and you can set its color, thickness and pattern, and then Revit will draw all the objects that fall in that zone in that line style. So it differentiates them between the, if you like, the main objects in the view in that particular floor plan view. Okay, so we've covered the four main elements of the view range settings: the top, the cut plane and the bottom in the primary range, and the view depth. These will control how your floor plans and your reflected ceiling plans are made up. However, there are a few exceptions in terms of how elements are displayed, and I just want to describe them here because as you work with your view range settings, some of your views or your floor plans, your ceiling plans may not look exactly as you expect, and it's probably because of some of these exceptions. So I just want to cover them quickly here so you know when to expect them and how to get around it. So we talked about elements that fall between the bottom and the view depth, so in that zone there being displayed in that beyond line style. Again, there are a few exceptions to that. So floors Floors will always be displayed in their projection line style. So if we had a floor down here and you could see the edge of it, don't expect that to be displayed in the beyond line style. It would just be displayed in its normal projection line style. Likewise with structural floors, they would be displayed in projection. And stairs and ramps, they have a tolerance of about 1.2 meters. So if you've got stairs that project down here below the bottom of the primary range, or a ramp, then for the first approximately 1.2 meters, that stairs or that ramp would be drawn in its projected line style. Then below 1.2, if there's any more of the stair or ramp left, then it switches to the beyond line style. So just watch out for that one. So moving on up to the cut plane, we saw previously how some categories are non-cuttable, i.e. like this piece of casework here, even though the object spans over the cut plane, it is not actually cut or drawn in a cut fashion when you view it in plan. It's drawn in projection, i.e. seeing the top of it. There are a number of categories like that, and I'll display them here for you. So they are balusters, detail items, electrical equipment, electrical fixtures, entourage, furniture, furniture systems, lighting fixtures, mechanical equipment, parking, planting, plumbing fixtures and specialty equipment. Any elements you have in your floor plan that are strictly within the cut plane or are intersected by the cut plane, if they're on any of those categories that are displayed here, they will not be cut through. You will see them displayed in projection. Also walls that are less than 2 meters in height, even if they span the cut plane, will not be cut through. They will be displayed in projection as well. So if we had a wall where its base is, let's say here, and it was less than 2 meters high, so the top was up about here somewhere, you would expect it to be cut through there, but because it is 2 meters or less, it will just be shown in projection in plan, the same as the cabinet here. You would just see the top of the wall and not cut through. You wouldn't see the layers in the wall. And finally, to conclude this unit, I want to talk about plan regions. Now, you'll come across situations in your Revit models where the cut plane won't cut through all the things you need it to in a particular view. So let's demonstrate that now. If I go back to the section, here we've got two windows in our model at different heights. I'll just, to further or better demonstrate this, just move that right up there. So you can see that at no point do the windows overlap vertically in terms of where we could put a cut plane. So no matter where we position the cut plane, whatever height, it's only ever going to be able to cut through one of the windows at any one time. So let's go back to the plan view there. So go back to our view range settings. So the cut plane's currently set to 1500 mil. Go back to our section and you can see it's just about cutting the element there, so it is cutting through the window. But quite often in our plans we would actually want to show that low level window. Now this situation typically arises on half landings for staircases, where you've got a stair that goes up with a landing and you've got a high level window, and with your cut plane down at this level on that floor plan you're not going to see that high level window, and quite often you'd actually want to show it on the same plan. Or with toilet windows, sometimes they're at high level, they'd be above the general cut plane, so again they wouldn't be seen. Or school halls where you've got clear story windows at high level and you want to cut through. So we can't put the cut plane in two places at the same time, but what we can do is add a localized cut plane just in the area that we want to cut and leave the default for the rest of the view. And we do that with what's called a plan region. So I'm going to show you that quickly now. Let's go back to our floor plan. So we're picking up the top window because our cut plane's at 1500. What we need to do now is set a small localized cut plane independent of the main cut plane for the view. So I need to go to View, plan views and plan region. Revit goes into sketch mode. I can choose a rectangle, makes it quicker to draw this, and I'm just going to define a boundary around which I want to set localized view range settings just for that area. So I can do that now. You can see in the properties for a plan region, view range, exactly the same parameters as we saw before, but whatever we set in here only applies within this boundary. So in a localized area here on our plan, we can lower that cut plane. Let's lower that down to, let's say 900, or a bit lower than that. Let's say 700. Hit OK. Come out of sketch mode, and now you can see we can actually cut through both windows even though they're at different heights. Obviously you can use that for different objects, not just windows. So where your cut plane for the whole floor plan view is not picking up certain elements that you need to cut through, just use that plan region tool to define a localized view range settings.
And that completes this unit. To get the most out of this training material, please take the complete course online at bimscape.com. Here you will find a complete learning management system that allows you to work through the course at your own pace. Comprehensive written tutorials provide additional information to that found in the training videos. Mark each unit as complete as you finish it and move on to the next. At any point you can return to any of the units you have previously completed to go over the material again. If you'd like to take this course online, please visit www.bimscape.com/Revit for details.